Last year, the Tesla Model Y was the best-selling car in the entire world, but that was the old Model Y. This is the new one.
And it's got quite a tough job on its hands because new electric SUVs are arriving all the time, battling it on price, range and charging speeds.
We've got two new rivals here, the BYD Sealion 7 and the MG IM6, supposedly the fastest charging electric car on sale.
To find out if Tesla should be worried or if people should still be rushing out to buy the Model Y, we are taking these three electric family SUVs from London to Cornwall and back. So let's start by telling you a little bit more about the three cars that we have on this test. And the car I'm driving is the new Tesla Model Y. It was launched a few months ago, earlier this year. But what made the Model Y so popular in the first place? Well, it was a few things really. For starters, it was very well priced for a fully electric SUV of this size. It also had a great range between charges, and it had unrestricted access to Tesla's brilliant supercharger network. Now, the cheaper Model 3 had all of those attributes too, but the Model Y was a lot more practical. It had a hatchback boot and more space in the back, so it was a much better bet if you were looking for a practical family car. The truth is though, it was never that great to drive. It had quite a firm, unsettled ride, and it was also fairly noisy for an electric car. And those are two areas that Tesla has apparently worked really hard on with this new version. There was also an updated interior with some more premium materials and a new look on the outside, of course, as well. And prices start at just under £45,000. The car I'm driving though is the long-range rear-wheel drive. It has the longest range of any Model Y of 387 miles. And okay, that isn't spectacular by the standards of the latest EVs. The new BMW iX3, for example, can officially do 500 miles on a charge, but it is still a really usable range. And if you want one of these, you will be spending £48,990.
And I'm in the BYD Sealion 7. I'm not sure what happened to the other 6, but anyway, we'll move on from that. This is the entry-level comfort model. Now, it's a bit of a strange name, but it's not actually a strange car. It's actually quite a good car, because think of it basically as a BYD Seal, but slightly taller and slightly longer. So there are 3 different trim levels and 2 different batteries. This one, the Comfort, as I said, is the cheapest entry-level model, and that gets an 82.5 kilowatt-hour battery and a range of 300 miles. Above that is the Design trim, which gets the same battery but 4-wheel drive. And then there's the range-topping Excellence trim, which is also 4-wheel drive, but it also gets a bigger battery, which is 91.3 kilowatt hours, and that bumps up the range to 312 miles. All of which means the range isn't as good as the Model Y, however, the Sealion 7 is cheaper. This one is £47,000 and the range goes all the way up to £59,000.
This is the MG IM6 and it is also cheaper than the Model Y. But this is the point where we should point out it depends which versions you go for, because there is an entry-level version of the Model Y which undercuts both the BYD and this MG. But we've got what is likely to be the most recommendable version of the Model Y, and we're putting it up against 2 equivalent rivals to that. And if you didn't recognise this as an MG immediately, we wouldn't blame you, to be honest, because you may have noticed it doesn't have an MG badge on the nose. And that's because where this car is built in China, it's sold under the IM brand instead. And so bringing it over to the UK, MG's decided to stick with the original badge for this and the other IM models that are due to head over here. We've already seen the IM5, which is a saloon, by the way. For this IM6, there are 2 different versions you can buy. This is the entry-level 100 long range. It's rear-wheel drive. It gets a battery with a usable capacity of 96.5 kilowatt hours. The price tag is £47,995. There is also a 100 performance version of the IM6, and that gets the same battery, but the official range drops a bit because it gets a lot more power. It can cover 0 to 62 miles an hour in just 3.5 seconds, which is properly rapid. But whichever version you look at, what makes the IM6 really stand out is the fact that this is the fastest charging electric car that you can buy. The first job on our journey to St Mawes in Cornwall was to take a closer look at the interiors of our cars.
So this is the new Model Y, and It looks very similar, doesn't it, in terms of layout? Still very minimalist. You've got the controls in the same basic place, including this touchscreen here. But the interior materials definitely feel better than they did before. You've got a mix of materials up here. You've got this fabric on the dashboard. You've got lots of faux leather. Some of the early Teslas were a little bit questionable when it comes to build quality, but this one feels a lot more solid. Now, the driving position, although you feel quite far from the road, it's almost as though the seat is jacked up rather than the whole car is quite high, because I've got the seat in its lowest position at the moment. And yeah, it's not the most natural of seating positions. You do get more side support on the seats though. On the old Model Y, there wasn't really very much at all. You used to roll around the car when you went around corners. But as I say, you now get more of that. Another good thing about the driving position is that unlike the latest Model 3, which has its indicator stalks removed, and you've now got buttons on the steering wheel here, and that is quite confusing. And I think Tesla has acknowledged that, because look what we have here. We have
It's a stalk.
an indicator stalk. I haven't seen one of those before.
I know.
Who would have thought that would be a great solution?
It's amazing.
Everyone will be doing that soon.
Yes, I think that is definitely a step in the right direction. But you still don't get a stalk for the gear selector.
No good.
So to select a gear, reverse, park, or drive, you have to use the touchscreen here, or alternatively there are some buttons above the rear view mirror. But it's not something you're going to do continually while you're driving.
It is a shame that they haven't put a stalk back for there.
I
Because
agree.
it's so much easier when you're reversing just to go bang, bang like that.
But in real world use, have you found it an annoyance?
Far less so than the indicators. So I think,
Sure.
yes, in an ideal world, I'd rather have a stalk, to be honest, but it's not a deal breaker.
You can't have everything.
You can't have everything. You do, though, get a very good infotainment system. It's the same basic one that we've seen on Teslas for a number of years now. Obviously, you get over-the-air software updates every now and then. And as I say, for a touchscreen, it's really good. It's quick to respond. The graphics are good. And the layout's quite logical as well. You've got some small icons down here, and obviously adjusting the air conditioning means playing around with silly little icons rather than having physical controls. But for a touchscreen, this is really, really good. The only thing you don't get though, and some people might be annoyed by that, is there is no smartphone mirroring, either for Android or Apple devices.
So that means I can't have Waze.
You can't have Waze, but you can have what's effectively Google Maps,
That's
which
true.
is the inbuilt
That's
sat-nav.
true.
And of all the infotainment systems out there, this is basically the only one where you're not constantly dreaming of having Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, are you?
Yeah, exactly, because you've got a selection of apps, not only Google Maps, but you've got Amazon Music, Spotify, and various others as well.
But now overall up front, it's a little bit different from before, but all the better for it, to be honest. And in the back, it's very similar as well. So no huge changes back here, and that means that if you're a tall adult sat in the rear seats, you've still got loads of legroom, loads of space for your feet under the seat in front, even when it's in its lowest position. Plenty of headroom, it's very comfortable sitting back here. There's lots of light as well. Now, I can also adjust the angle of the backrest.
Electrically.
Electrically. Now the difference between the most upright and the most laid back isn't huge, but it's still nice to have. And I've also got a new screen back here, so I can play
Amazing.
some games, I can adjust the climate control, I can access some different media functions. So still as spacious and accommodating as the old Model Y, but now with a few extra tech upgrades as well.
Okay, should we have a look at the BYD?
Let's go.
Right, so what do you two think about the interior in this car in terms of style? Because I think it's more interesting than Tesla. There's a bit more going on, it's a bit more stylish. You've got these nice swoops down here of the door pulls, and even the door release buttons here feel quite kind of stylish. Then you've got a lot more materials, haven't you? You've got the fake metal here, then there's this soft spongy section here, and straight in front of me you've got this ambient lighting screen.
I would say it definitely looks more interesting, there's more going on. Whether or not you prefer this design or the more minimalist look of the Tesla really comes down to personal
Yeah,
preference.
it's totally subjective.
But when it comes to actually comparing the quality of materials that are used, there isn't a huge difference between the two cars, is there?
There isn't, however, there are some differences. For example, these vents at the centre here and on the sides of the car feel a little bit flimsy, look a bit flimsy. What do you reckon?
Yeah, they're not ideal, are they? But to be fair, you probably won't use those very often.
No, and then the other thing is, don't even have to see it, you can hear it. It is a small point because they are quite low down in the cabin. Most of the stuff that's up and the stuff that you're going to touch regularly feels a bit more premium. But compared to the Tesla, which doesn't really have any scratchy plastic in it,
No.
that is a weakness.
That is more consistent in its interior quality.
It is.
Throughout, isn't it?
Correct. You've got a slightly more conventional driving position in this BYD as well, haven't you?
You do, especially in terms of the usability of the car. For example, we have an indicator stalk, but not just that, I have a wiper stalk over there.
Wow.
Exactly. Over there, Will, you've got your mirrors, an actual joystick pad with 2 little buttons.
Don't have to use the touchscreen for that.
Again, don't have to do that.
Talking of the steering wheel though, do you find that it is angled up towards your face a bit like you're driving a bus or something?
It is a little bit, yes.
I prefer it was more vertical.
It is, but I also feel it's a bit more SUV-like in here. You feel like you're sitting in this cabin rather than maybe arguably on it like you do in the Tesla. For example, the dashboard feels much higher and it makes the car feel a bit more substantial as well.
Feels more like an SUV.
Yeah. Oh, and look, gear lever.
BMW.
Exactly.
Now you do have some fancy cup holders, don't you?
Good point. If you've got a tall bottle, you can leave the cup holder in its lowest setting, but it's height adjustable. So if I press this, then the floor of the cup holder raises.
Wow.
So I can put my little espresso in there and not have to fish it out.
It's quite a neat feature.
It is,
I'm
actually.
not sure how useful it is.
I'd probably have it in the highest setting most of the time and then have a big bottle out here, but it is useful nonetheless. Storage space is okay, isn't it? But it's not quite as good as the Tesla.
It's not. I mean, for example, there's a decent sized bin down there, and you have got a tray underneath the centre console. It's like this floating centre console, and you've got your wireless charging up here, 50-watt wireless charging as well. And it's cooled, and it's cooled to stop your phone overheating. And then down here some USB stuff. The door bins are quite small. There is a good sized glove box though. I've got my coffee mug in there. Maybe I should put that in the cup holder, Will.
You should do.
I don't know if it'll fit though.
Okay, a couple of other things. This screen behind the steering wheel here, the graphics on that aren't particularly great. They're a little bit fuzzy, aren't they?
Yes, you're right. It's quite fuzzy.
What about the main infotainment system though?
Less fuzzy, but still not as clear and high def as the Tesla's one.
Yeah, I'd agree. You do get Google Maps inbuilt, but unlike the Tesla, you do also get smartphone mirroring, don't you?
You do, which brings me on to the other party feature. It's the rotating screen. Wow, we love the rotating screen. I mean, it's a gimmick. Sure. It's something to show people. The Tesla's got its fart mode. This has got its rotating screen. I'm not quite sure how much life you're going to get out of that in terms of joking around.
No, because you can't use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto when it's in its portrait orientation, can you?
No, you can't. It automatically, if you select Apple CarPlay, it will automatically rotate around to that.
So for me, I would never have it in portrait.
These climate control icons are quite similar in look to those in the Tesla, aren't
Well, they're also quite small.
they? Are. And yeah, they are slightly fiddly, but you can take 3 fingers and that, look, it's not the easiest thing to do either.
Do you know what? I didn't know that, but having watched you use it, I don't think I'll bother with it.
Well, also, if you take those 3 fingers or another 3 fingers and swipe left or right, you can actually adjust the fan speed. Or you can use the voice control. Not ideal, I would prefer physical controls, of course, but it's better than just relying on icons.
So overall up front, the Model Y does have the edge when it comes to quality and when it comes to tech, right?
It does.
I would say, yeah, definitely tech, quality, a small smidge.
Well, the back, again, if you're a tall adult sat in the back of this BYD, you're going to be absolutely fine. Loads of leg room, good amount of foot space as well, not as much as in the Model Y. Headroom is also not quite as generous as it is in the Model Y because of the way that this sunroof is designed. In the Model Y, when you're in the most reclined position, you've still got a bit more clearance above your head than you do in this BYD. As you were mentioning how comfortable the seats are on the front, it's the same story in the back here. They are more luxurious feeling.
You've also got quilted leather.
I have.
You don't, though, have a screen.
I don't have a screen, but I do have an ashtray, or what looks like it might be an ashtray. So I've got 2 USB-C ports, so I can charge my vape or my phone. And overall in the back, there's perhaps a little bit more foot space down here than you find in the Model Y. And also the rear doors open much wider in this car. But overall, there's not a huge difference between the 2 cars. And if you're tall, sat in the back of either, you're going to be fine.
What have you got in the armrest there?
Well, I can reveal a rather snazzy setup with 2 cup holders and also a very, very shallow storage compartment for a credit card.
Amazing.
And not much else. So this MG, it's got a slightly different layout from the other 2 cars, hasn't it? Because you've got this extra screen down there on the center console, which in one sense you might think's good because you've got lots of controls close to hand. But the problem with it is that it's quite confusing, to say the least, and you've got to take your eyes very far from the road to actually be able to work out what's going on and have a good look at it.
I do agree with that because I find that, why has it got duplications of everything? Why has it got, for example, you can go into TikTok, not that I really want to go into TikTok, but I can do that from this screen, but I can also do it from that screen. because it just starts to jumble everything up. Like, which one do I need to do to find that function?
It's not very logical. It's
No.
nowhere near as simple as the setup that you have in the Model Y.
One good thing though, it does have a more dedicated, and it seems to come up more often, I can't find it now, the ADAS button, which is good because this actually has the most nannying of all the ADAS systems. I find the other ones I don't really need to turn it off or turn the systems off, whereas this one, it's always interfering with the steering, or it's telling me I'm going to crash into something, or it's doing something.
It's quite intrusive, isn't it?
It is. Now, in terms of quality here, you can see and feel that there's actually loads of soft touch materials basically everywhere.
Build quality is on the whole really good.
Yeah,
okay,
really good.
this armrest here is a little bit wobbly, but overall I would say when it comes to interior quality, there isn't a huge amount to separate these cars.
And it's a similar story when it comes to rear seat space as well, because fundamentally if you're tall, sat in the back of any of these cars, you're going to be fine. But in this MG, it actually has the best headroom of the lot.
Yeah, I can see that from here. You look like you have the most headroom.
And that's partly because, again, of the design of this panoramic sunroof that you get, where it goes all the way to the back behind your head. And you can adjust the angle of the backrest, but it's like the BYD where you've got to reach over your shoulder and do it manually, rather than having the Model Y's electrically adjustable option. Legroom is also really good in this car. Foot space, similar to what's on offer in the BYD, not quite as generous as the Model Y, but fundamentally still very spacious in the rear seats here. Now, I've also got some cup holders that I can reveal by pulling this middle seat down, but it's more of a kind of rudimentary layout like the Model Y rather than what the BYD offers.
But what's not rudimentary are these shag pile carpets down here.
Look at this.
That is proper luxury,
Such
isn't it?
luxury. So overall, when it comes to interior quality, the Model Y does have the edge over the other two cars, but they're not a million miles away. But when it comes to the tech that's on offer, that is where the Tesla has a clear margin of victory over the other two cars. We got back on the road and made our way down to Cornwall, all of us knowing a charging stop would be needed before we made it.
Right, so from the very beginning of this test, Doug and I had our eye on a charging point in Bodmin, which is a 400 kilowatt charger, one of the fastest that is on offer in the UK at the moment. And that's because Doug has an electric car that can, in theory at least, pull almost 400 kilowatts of charging power. I look like I'm going to get there fairly easily. The sat nav at the moment is telling me I will have 14% when I arrive, and actually the battery is being preconditioned at the moment, heated up, so it will charge as fast as possible when I get there.
I also had plenty of range to make it to the 400 kilowatt chargers, but things weren't quite so simple for John in the Sealion 7.
Right, so situation update, where are we? Been on the road all day, currently showing 192 miles on the trip computer. Now those guys were meant to be meeting somewhere further away at a charger. We didn't think, and I didn't think, this BYD Sealion was going to get there, so the plan was to stop a bit earlier. However, the distance to the charger that they're meeting at is 47 miles and the range is 67 miles, which is a buffer of 20 miles. Is that going to be enough though? I thought it would be, because we seem to be doing quite well. However, as you may be able to see, the heavens have opened, which means water on the road, which means more drag, which means that 20-mile buffer isn't looking quite so good anymore. And that means I've got a slight squeaky bum, if I'm honest.
As we carried on down the road through the rain, John's 20-mile buffer quickly fell away.
It's definitely getting worse. Mileage, don't have any miles anymore, it's just got ... but I do have 5% battery left, which is something, because I've got 1.8 miles left to go.
So we have all made it to this charging destination, and now what we're going to do, as you might have guessed, is charge up. And I'm in this MG, which is supposedly the fastest charging electric car that you can buy. It can accept 396 kilowatts, and we found
400.
some 400 kilowatt chargers right here.
Woohoo!
John, you're not parked here.
No,
Why is that?
because that charger is a 350 kilowatt charger, and my car only accepts 150 kilowatts, so it's more than enough for that, but I've no point in me being there.
Okay, so I have got here on 25%. I propose that we all plug in and charge up to 80% before we head off. So Will, what percentage have you got left in the Model Y?
I have 15%, so not bad, I think. How about you, John?
Made electricity,
You made electricity on the way down.
150%, yeah.
That is quite impressive. How much have you really got?
4%.
Okay, so that is quite tight, But to be fair, you did make it. You didn't think you were going to at one point.
I didn't. I was brave and I kept my foot in.
Okay, well, it's pouring with rain, so should we get these cars plugged in and see how quickly they can charge up? Okay, we're already up to about 40%, and so far I have achieved a maximum charging rate of 217 kilowatts, which isn't bad at all. That's pretty fast. The Model Y, in theory, can pull up to 250 kilowatts, but we should be up to 80% if we continue at this sort of rate very quickly.
While Will was very pleased with his numbers from the Tesla, I was less impressed with the MG. So this charger says 400 kilowatts at the top, and on the display here, which is digital, so it's not a sticker that's unchangeable, it says this charger delivers up to 400 kilowatts. If I look at my active session right now, I'm on 45% and I'm receiving 227 kilowatts, which is not 396. But of course, it's difficult to know whether that is a problem with this charger or with the car itself. The Sealion 7, however, seemed to be pulling closest to its official maximum charging rate. News that didn't seem to make up for how miserable John was.
It's wet and cold, but it's still charging, and it was charging at 149 kilowatts, which is basically the max. It's at 59% now. It's charging at 103 kilowatts, which is all right.
In the end, the Sealion 7 did take the longest to get a 25 to 80% top up. It managed an average charging speed of 124 kilowatts for the whole time it was plugged in, not far off the 150 kilowatt official rate, and John was waiting for 29 minutes. Although Will saw a peak of 217 kilowatts from the Model Y, the average charging speed over his entire top up was quite a bit slower than the Sealion 7 at 103 kilowatts. Because the Model Y has a smaller battery though, it took him a minute less to go from 25 to 80%. And me and the MG, well, I never got close to 396 kilowatts, but I did still get from 25 to 80% of my battery in a very impressive 17 minutes, recording an average speed of 208 kilowatts. With all batteries topped up, we headed on to our overnight stop in St Moors. The following morning, before heading back to London, we took a closer look at the boots.
Okay, so the Model Y, we know it very well, and one of the best things about it is its boot, absolutely enormous. And I managed to fit 10 of these carry-on suitcases into the boot, with a bit of space left over there, you can see. And if you're wondering where they all are, because of course there are only 7 visible up here, well, that's because there are 2 under the boot floor. There's a huge well under there. And the final one is actually under the bonnet in the front. So I think that's a pretty good benchmark. How does that compare to your cars?
So the BYD, not quite as good as the Tesla, but not bad, because under there we have got 6 suitcases there, 1 underneath the boot floor and 1 up the front.
Okay, so how many is that in total?
8.
Okay, and if you were to chop one in half, there is enough space left over, more space than was left over in the Tesla, to fit another one in there, I think.
There is.
Let me first point out how much this looks like an Aston Martin DBX
It does.
from the back, right? And also it's got the coolest boot release because it's here.
No MG badge.
No MG badge, but they've turned the IM badge into the boot release. And as for the boot itself, I could fit a total of 8 suitcases into this IM6.
That's not bad, is it?
And that is 7 up top here and 1 under the boot floor.
Okay, where's the parcel shelf?
The parcel shelf looks like it should be attached here, but this test car doesn't actually have one. So we're assuming that these 7 suitcases can fit underneath it on this test car. I've also got a front boot, like the other 2 cars here, but the one in this MG is terrible. I can fit a very tiny lunchbox, but not much else, certainly not a suitcase. So it's the worst of the 3 in that respect.
The only thing is you haven't got as much space left over as I have in the BYD, have you?
No, that is true. You could more easily fit those suitcases up top. I do though, like the Sealion 7, have 60/40 split folding rear seats. That's not as practical as the 40/20/40 split folding rear seats you get on the Model Y. And while I've got a lot of underfloor storage, I don't have a height adjustable boot floor. So overall, all 3 boots are pretty good. There isn't a bad one here, but it's the Model Ys that's the best.
Yep.
It is.
Let's go.
Now, as I mentioned yesterday, the original Model Y wasn't particularly great to drive, but I'm happy to report this new one is much, much better. Let's start with ride comfort. Now this still has fairly firm suspension for a family SUV, but it's also extremely well controlled. So even along a poorly surfaced road like the one I'm driving on now, you're not going to have many complaints about ride comfort at all. This is also quieter than the old Model Y. There's a lot less suspension noise reverberating around the interior. There's not much wind noise at all, despite the fact that these doors are frameless. And also, there's only a small amount of road noise, and that's even with the optional 20-inch wheels that this car has. The old Model Y also had incredibly quick steering, and that just made the car feel quite nervous along a twisty road. But the steering has been made less hyperactive, so you're not making constant corrections all the time. Although, to be honest, I would still prefer a slightly slower rack in what's a family SUV ultimately. But this car can carry a lot of speed through corners. So if you're looking for a sportier family SUV, then this is definitely the one to go for.
This isn't particularly sporty. The BYD is, let's say, a bit softer, more relaxed, a bit more comfortable over bumps. It leans a bit more through corners, and it's the slowest of the three. However, slowest doesn't actually mean slow, because look, when I put my foot down, it still picks up pretty promptly. Like the Tesla, the steering is quite quick around the straight ahead. However, it doesn't give you the same level of confidence to attack the bends because it doesn't weight up as progressively thereafter. That said, it's still relatively easy to thread this car down a nice country road like this. And what about the brakes? Well, they're not as abrupt as some EVs can be. However, it's probably on balance the worst of the three cars here in that respect, especially next to the Teslas, which has a firmer, more responsive brake pedal.
Now, the IM6 has the most luxurious carpets of the three cars here, and in some ways this is the most luxurious on the road as well, and that's mainly because of the ride that it offers. It's the softest of the three cars here. Now, sometimes softness can be bad because it can mean that a car is a bit wobbly and uncontrolled, something that the BYD suffers from a little bit. But in this IM6, the ride is plush and settled most of the time. It's also quiet in here. Now, when it comes to wind noise, there isn't much to separate the three cars, but for road noise, this is the best isolated from that. And there's also less buzzing up through the steering column and in the seat in this MG compared to the other two cars as well. This is also the quickest in a straight line. The steering, though, is the slowest. However, that suits the relaxed nature of this car. The only problem with it is that you don't have a great sense of connection to the front end and what the front wheels are doing. And so overall, it is the Model Y that's the sportiest. This IM6 is the most luxurious. The BYD fits somewhere in the middle, but closer to the MG than the Model Y. But all three cars on the road are really pretty good.
Okay, we've had some nice country road driving on the way out of Cornwall, but now we are on the A30 and it's pretty much A roads and motorways all the way back to London. And of course, we're going to need to charge before we get there. Now, yesterday I used an Ionity charger, but you're probably not going to do that very often if you buy a Tesla, because one of the great benefits of buying any Tesla is the fact that you get unrestricted access to Tesla's supercharger network, which is not only cheaper than most other public charging networks, like Ionity for example, but it also syncs up with the infotainment system, so you don't need to worry about finding a charging point on a third-party app. All you do is program in your destination, which I've just done, and it tells you where to stop for a charge. I've programmed in Twickenham and it is telling me to stop at Exeter Services. I will arrive there, apparently, with 17% of my battery remaining. When I get there, I'll charge back up to 80%, and hopefully, because I'm using a Tesla charger, it will do so quicker than it did yesterday on the Ionity charger, but we'll find out.
Unlike some Tesla superchargers, the ones at Exeter Services aren't open to non-Tesla EVs. Fortunately, there are plenty of other high-power grid-served chargers on site that we could use. We all plugged in, charged to 80%, and then headed back to the office for a final top-up before crunching the numbers. Now, we saw that in my first charging stop, I didn't get anywhere near the 396 kilowatt official maximum speed, but the speed I did get was really quick and impressive still, For the second stop though, at Exeter Services, things were nowhere near as good. So I was plugged into a grid serve charger, which was supposedly capable of delivering 350 kilowatts, but I saw a peak rate of about 86 kilowatts. And so that meant it took me 40 minutes to go from 25 to 80%.
Okay, but was it cheap?
It was 89 pence per kilowatt hour. You will struggle to find a more expensive public charging point than that, to be honest. John, you were plugged in next to me.
I was.
But had a slightly more positive experience, didn't you?
Well, I was still paying the same extortionate amount of money that you were, but it took me just 27 minutes to top up from 25 to 80%, despite having technically the slowest peak charging rate of all the cars there. Will, you had the best time at Exeter Services, didn't you?
I did, because although it took me slightly longer to charge up, I was waiting 30 minutes to go from 25 to 80%. I was only paying 39p per kilowatt hour, so less than half what you guys were being charged.
Well, so the conclusion for that is that it's still a huge advantage for Teslas having access to all Tesla superchargers, particularly when it comes to costs. And let's talk about what we spent on the day. So my total charging costs, assuming that the final charge we did after driving from Exeter to our final destination was done from a home wall box at the current energy price cap. That meant that I spent £119.18 for the 550-ish miles that we covered. John, what did it cost you in the BYD?
£130 and 6 pence.
That's a bit more. And Will?
£81.62. And that's despite me actually doing an extra 9 miles because at one point my sat-nav took me on a slightly different route than you guys.
Right, now it's important to point out that more and more superchargers are open to non-Teslas.
They are.
But it's not all of them, and you will pay more if you aren't in a Tesla, although what you'll pay is still a lot less than most other public chargers. And from our experience, it is superchargers that tend to be very well maintained, offering consistently good charging speeds and really competitive prices as well. So yes, while it's nice that the MG has the fastest maximum charging speed on paper, good luck actually seeing that in the real world. It doesn't give it a huge advantage over the Model Y. But now it's time to run through all the numbers for this test and pick a winner. So we've covered charging, let's talk about range. And it's the Sealion 7 that has the worst official range.
It does, but when you think it made it to all the same charging stops as both the other cars, albeit cutting it super fine on the range to get there, but ultimately, yes, it does have the worst range of the three, based on the percentage of battery remaining at our first charging stop, and extrapolating that down to 0%, then the Sealion has a real-world maximum range on a full charge of 249 miles. And my real-world efficiency on this trip was 2.6 miles per kilowatt hour, which really isn't that great either.
The Model Y was much better, particularly when it comes to efficiency, actually, because it averaged 3.2 miles per kilowatt hour. And like with the Sealion 7, that is when you factor in charging losses, so the amount of energy pulled from the grid to do the journey. And my real-world range works out to 273 miles.
But it was the MG that had the best range at 299 miles. Like the Sealion 7 though, it was well behind the Tesla on efficiency at 2.8 miles per kilowatt hour. So the Model Y is the most efficient. It has a big advantage in getting access to all superchargers, and even though it can't quite travel as far on a full charge as the MG, it's still got a great real-world range. But what about other costs?
Well, if we look at PCP finance deals, it's the Model Y that will cost you the least per month. Based on a £5,000 deposit, a 10,000 mile annual limit, and a 48-month term, you'll be paying £462 a month. On the same terms, the IM6 will cost you £491, and the Sealion 7 is the most expensive at £518 per month.
So to summarise all of our findings then, it seems that it's the Sealion 7 that doesn't really have an outright advantage over the other cars in any area.
Well, except it's arguably got the best driving position. It's the most SUV-like when you're sitting in the driver's seat, and has the most comfortable seats and the easiest controls because it's got a lot more physical buttons in it. But yes, it has to be said, it's probably the least recommendable car in this test. It's ultimately let down by its efficiency and range, and it's not as good as the other two cars in this test in terms of ride and handling and performance. But it's certainly not a bad car, it's just not the best here.
No, and it's not far behind, but the MG has the edge on it in a fair few areas. It's certainly MG's best electric car to date, isn't it?
It is.
And it beats not just the Sealion 7, but the Model Y for range. It also has the most comfortable ride, in theory, and sometimes in practice, the fastest charging speed. It just about has the most rear seat space, and it's also got a 7-year warranty, which beats the 6-year cover from BYD and the 4-year cover from Tesla. And it also has a slightly better Euro NCAP safety rating than the Sealion 7. That's when you dig into the actual crash safety results. Although we should also point out that the new Model Y hasn't actually been tested yet. But the overall winner is...
Well, the Sealion 7 and the IM6 are actually very good electric SUVs, and I think it's important to point out that both of them would have beaten the previous generation Model Y. But the latest Model Y is quite a big step forward over the previous generation car, not actually in terms of range and charging, but for ride comfort and refinement in particular, and also interior quality has moved on quite a bit too. And compared with the MG, the Model Y has a significantly better infotainment system, sharper handling, it's got a bigger boot, better efficiency, and it's also likely to cost you significantly less to run. So overall, the Model Y is the best all-rounder here, and it's actually one of the best electric SUVs that you can buy at any price point.
So, there you have it. Thanks very much for watching this review. If you want to see another one, then click up there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel as well. And to read much more about these cars and every other car around, click on that link to go to whatcar.com.